Welcome to the Going Beyond podcast. I'm your host, Randy Zinn. I'm a mother, an author, and an entrepreneur who is committed to and curious about living a life that is always evolving. This is a lifestyle podcast covering health, both body and mind, self-care, why it is a necessity, and how tough it can be to master, entrepreneurship, its ups and downs, cultural disruption, and the topics we sometimes avoid, as well as love, sex, friendship, and more. This podcast is a place and a community for people who are willing to do the hard work of growth, who want the tools and inspiration to step into it, and who want to grow each and every day of their lives. I interview movement makers, leaders, survivors, writers, and founders. Their stories move me and will move you to cultivate more strength and clarity during every step of your day. Enjoy today's episode, and thanks for spending time with me at this very special place in my life over here at the Going Beyond podcast. If you're enjoying the Going Beyond podcast, consider subscribing so you never miss an episode. When you subscribe, our weekly episode arrives right onto your device on whichever platform you've subscribed from. We also appreciate 5-star ratings and reviews. Thanks so much for your support, friends. We're so glad you're hanging with us. Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's episode. Welcome. So I say this totally humbly, and I just said it to my guest of the day. I receive a lot of pitches for guests on this podcast, which is actually a giant honor. It means that people want to hang with me and people want to share their story on this show. And admittedly, I can't interview everybody. I do curate the content on this show. And the person that arrives to the show today, her name is Melanie Weller. A pitch came through and I was immediately intrigued and fascinated. I love to learn. I love to kind of weave together my fascination for health and wellness, for healing, and for, let's call it like the wisdom that we always sense around us, or most of us sense around us, but we don't always have the physical proof of, and how that all weaves together. So it's like science and wisdom. I'm so into it. So when Melanie's name and expertise came across my laptop, I was like, I need to talk to this woman. So I'm going to introduce her now, and then we're going to dive into a conversation in which we're all going to get a chance to learn from her expertise. So Melanie Weller is a world's leading expert in opening the door to health, performance, and innovation through the vagus nerve. And we're going to learn a lot about the vagus nerve in our body. And here it says that the vagus nerve is the bridge between our narratives, our stories, and our physical experience. She's a medical visionary and a storyteller for the human body. Melanie weaves science and wisdom together to create transformation for her clients that feel like magic. Melanie is a trained physical therapist, a board-certified orthopedic clinical specialist, a certified athletic trainer, and certified exercise expert for aging adults. Many of you know that in this time, particularly during the pandemic, I have been really diving into conversations that fuse understanding between the mind and the body, between stress and our physical experiences. I've had somatic therapists on the show. This is a topic that feels extremely important to me personally, and also to my guests. I want you guys to understand how to understand your own experiences, particularly during this time. So I'm really excited to learn today. So Melanie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Randy. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited you're here. So we're talking today. I'm in New York. You're in New Orleans.
Yes.
That's cool. So that's a city that you love.
We do love it here. Yes. My husband and I are not from here, but we landed here about 11 years ago and fell in love with it. So here we are.
I'm embarrassed. I've never been, but it's seriously on my list. I will get there.
Come on down. It's always the fun time.
I think so. And you also are a mom of 2 teenage boys, you said.
I do. Yes. Empty nest is light is at the end of the tunnel. We're getting close to the end of having everybody at home. Okay. It's super exciting. I love having teenagers. When I wanted children, my dream was always to have a college student, somebody that would come home and visit on occasion. I'm almost there.
Okay, amazing. All right. So we have a lot to learn in our our few minutes of prepping for this conversation, you're kind of already creating so many bridges between all these things that I feel like I know a little bit about, but maybe not a ton about. So I first feel like you need to explain to us a little bit about the vagus nerve and about what it is and why it's become such a central focus of your work. So maybe we start there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yes, let's lay that foundation. So the vagus nerve is the biggest component of your parasympathetic nervous system. So it counters your fight and flight system. And most of us know our vagus nerves best when it's not working so well, when we go to do a public speaking engagement or something that makes us similarly nervous, and we get a lump in our throats and our palms sweat, our hearts start to race, and our digestion shifts, because those are all vagus nerve mediated functions. And those changes happen because your vagus nerve has been dialed down and your fight and flight system has been dialed up. And your vagus nerve originates in your brainstem and it goes all the way down to the pelvis. It innervates your vocal cords, your heart, and your digestive system. It's involved in digestive enzyme secretion, bile secretion, nutrient absorption. It gives sensory information from almost all of your organs up to your brain. And in women, it innervates the cervix. And research shows that women with complete spinal cord injuries can achieve orgasm with vagus nerve stimulation. So it's also a big part of our pleasure pathways as well. In the research, we know that when people experience trauma, that their vagus nerves get dialed down. And as a physical therapist, my longstanding interest in it has been it started because the vagus nerve mediates inflammation in the body, and it uses the same neurotransmitter that your muscles do. So when you treat the vagus nerve, you get these really beautiful musculoskeletal shifts. And that's been was the focus of my career for a long, long time. And we know that stress and trauma always affect the voice and the breath. And your vocal cords and your diaphragm are horizontally oriented in your body. And certainly in extreme cases of trauma, people will lose bowel or bladder control. And your pelvic floor is also oriented horizontally in the body. So we have this horizontal system of structures in the body that responds to stress. And when those horizontal structures get affected, it pinches the vertical structures that go through them. And I contextualize a lot of this through the vagus nerve, but certainly in your diaphragm and your pelvic floor, you have other structures, nerves and arteries and veins and lymphatics that go vertically through those areas as well. And when you lose flow internally, you also lose flow externally in your life. And this concept is very consistent with the Chinese medicine concept of qi flowing through the body as well. It's also very consistent with how we are a microcosm of the macrocosm. The cosmos and nature are very rotational. Flower petals are, obviously rotational. Hurricanes spin. Our solar system is rotational. And when I think about alignment, I think about it in that much, much bigger picture. My background is in treating complicated chronic pain patients and others that have not found success in where they want to be. And so I've been shoved outside of the box enough times because these people have often seen many, many other skilled physical therapists and chiropractors and doctors, and sometimes had multiple surgeries, and nothing has worked for them. And so when I think about alignment, like if we look at the diaphragm, the muscle that we breathe with, all of our diaphragms have more muscle mass on the right side than they do on the left. So theoretically, the right side will always win. And so a lot of people are stuck in this right diaphragm dominance, but the earth below us and the solar system above us all spin the opposite direction. And so when we're out of alignment and out of flow in life, we're often out of flow on a much bigger scale than I think we really appreciate. And we know through research that our vagus nerves, that when solar and space weather disrupts the electromagnetic field of the earth, it causes measurable changes in our vagus nerves. So we are literally, your vagus nerve is the mechanism through which, as the micro, that we respond to the macro.
Well, I just want to pause there for a second. I'm fascinated. I think just personally, I've been through a whole bunch of stuff, physically, and exploring tension and pain in my body on one side versus another, and how that's corresponded with loss and stress in my life. Then you mention, the cosmos and the planets and the movement. And to me, it just comes back to that that knowledge that I think I always lean into and I always want to understand more, which is how are we all connected to everything, to one another and to everything around us. And so I'm curious because your understanding is on some level so scientific because it is so physically based, but what you're starting to talk about here is the stuff that I would assume most physical therapists are not necessarily making a bridge between what's going on in the cosmos when you're treating someone who's in physical pain.
Absolutely. No, this is definitely a leading edge or a jump for, for a lot of people in there thinking no matter what their background is. As I branded myself as a stress management expert, and when we know medically that 75 to 90% of all illness and disease is stress, but we don't really define what that is very specifically. And in working with people for over 25 years, what I heard over and over was how what was happening inside of their body was very metaphoric for what was happening in their personal lives and in their businesses as well. And my superpower that I claim now is really in helping people with those spiritual underpinnings of their physical dysfunction. And this has also been very much a journey of me learning, solving my own vagus nerve decompression and solving that problem as well. And your vagus nerve is really the bridge between your story and your body. And when your story is stress and trauma, your vagus nerve is dialed down. And when your story is gratitude, appreciation, pleasure, enjoyment, then your vagus nerve gets dialed up. And the research supports this. Literally breathing a feeling of gratitude or appreciation into your heart improves your vagus nerve function. And it's a huge piece of our mental health as well. I've treated a lot of anxiety and depression and suicide ideation. And I know how to identify. I will say people haven't come to me specifically for suicide ideation necessarily, but I know exactly when to ask about it because there's this very specific physical expression of it.
What is it?
They get locked up in rotation. Their rotational motion is minimal. And it's not like it's just kind of tight. When people are in suicide ideation, I don't call that vagus nerve compression. I call that vagus nerve lockdown. And it takes a skilled eye and skilled hands to tease that out a little bit because we're all master compensators for movement. So like when they come into my office, it's not like they're walking stiff as a board and they can't rotate at all. But certainly we can all identify with the idea that nobody has stress or trauma and it has really great arm swing when they walk. We all lock up. But when I use my PT skills to isolate the rotation at their first and second vertebrae in their neck and to really isolate their thoracic rotation and their lumbar rotation and look at their tibial rotation, those are all basically absent, that they're compensating for all of it. And I have some background in visceral mobilization as well. And when you tap into their visceral motilities, like the rhythms of their organs and other structures, they're super quiet. And I think the only rule we ever follow is as above, so below. And these people often feel basically dead under my hands, like their bodies are eerily quiet compared to what normal or even somebody in pain, back pain or, something a little more typical would be. And I think they're trying to match the story outside with what's happening inside of them. And my experience has been that when you give them that flow back in their bodies, that drive for self-destruction disappears.
Wow.
Or it relieves it dramatically and then allows other therapies to work better. And that's been part of my own story too. I had that script running through my head for many, many years. And
I was going to ask you to actually elaborate and tell us just a little bit about like your personal connection to this work, because it's, to me, as I'm listening to you speak, I just keep hearing all of these layers. It's like,
oh, it's so many layers. Yeah. I'll say fundamentally, I think I've been through so many layers of it. I think that my deepest connection to the vagus nerve is actually through voice, which has been kind of my last frontier, because as a physical therapist, I didn't really get vocal dysfunction. Those usually went to the speech pathologist. So I didn't treat overwhelmingly people that had vocal dysfunction. And lost voice is very much the story of my childhood. I didn't feel like I had a voice at home. My choir instructor growing up wouldn't let me sing. She made me mouth the words to the music. And because I didn't have a voice at home, I didn't tell my parents. So I just spent years in choir mouthing the words. And the stress of that, though, builds up, and it affects how you value yourself, and none of my peers stood up for me in that time either. And so, I learned very early that my voice didn't matter, and it was essentially pointless to use it in basically any area. And as you or at least for me, as I repressed my emotions, like I became a master of shoving it all down. Like I was very good at containing my emotions. And then I was a Navy wife for 20 years. And I was an awesome Navy wife because I could do 6-month deployments. I could have my husband gone for months at a time and not be wrecked by it because I could really hold that together very well. And when he retired is when the lid came off of everything for me, because I had none of those external expectations to hold myself together. And my body started falling apart. I had a lot of foot pain. My blood pressure was going quite high. My marriage was in a lot of distress, and I had a professional lawsuit brought against me. And so it was like every area of my life was starting to crumble. And, in hindsight, I'll say that I was really just not being myself, and that's it seems like it should be such an easy thing, but it's really, for so many people, it's definitely not. And I really for me, it was a huge reconciliation and really a huge gift from the universe, that I'll say in hindsight, that our traumas are very much initiations once you can move past the victimization piece of it.
Sure.
And, I had to reconcile. I think I always thought my intuition and my logic were the same thing, and they really got peeled apart there. And I realized how I was able to have that gift of being able to help people with the spiritual underpinnings of their physical dysfunction. It wasn't just me being logical. There was this intuitive gift that I had.
Yeah.
And I really ended up really kind of smacked in the face with it, because as I was helping people and sharing metaphors and what I was seeing in my own mind, they would say things to me like, Melanie, you just described my grandmother in the outfit we buried her in. And I was like, oh, I didn't consider that. I was seeing, but that creates very much an identity crisis sort of, and while part of it was really fun, it was also very stressful. And what do I do with this? I've spent years and years collecting credentials, letters after my name.
Right.
And so I stepped back because I really felt like there was a logical way that the universe is so well organized. I was like, there's a system here. There's something here that I need to figure out. Like this isn't, I know even when it seems like I'm pulling something out of thin air, and I needed to make my practice truer to myself.
Right. Well, I think the only thing that's confusing about any part of it is just how human beings have tried to organize it.
Yes.
But in fact, like this idea that whatever we've gone through alters us mind body, lives in us mind body, and it becomes, and then as human beings, we're kind of always working within that and compensating for that in ways that can become dysfunctional or feel painful is just sort of what it is. And then, how I see it and how I've, experienced it on my own is that there's all of these ways into understanding and all of these ways to redefining or undoing or creating a new pathway or whatever. And I think different people will experience different ways in at different times. So, to me, it all very much makes sense, but I can understand how to you kind of like as a more, linear practitioner, but then you start having all of this awareness. It's like you have to somehow organize it in a way that, your clients and your patients can understand. Yeah. And you can represent yourself.
Right, right. So in taking a couple steps back and really, in the midst of my own midlife spiritual awakening, I did a lot of reading, and one of the things that I learned was that mythology was a mode of transmitting scientific information. And I talk about stress and the vagus nerve a lot around the Egyptian myth of Isis and Osiris. And that story contains many of the numbers of the Earth's precessional cycle in it. So we know that it was a way they communicated the cosmology. And to give you the nutshell version of the story, in that Osiris was the king of Egypt, and his brother Set was jealous and angry and wanted to be king. And so Set tricked Osiris into laying down in a bejeweled coffin, had his soldiers close the lid, nail it shut, and carry him to the Nile River to send him downstream to his death. Osiris's wife Isis found out about this, and she retrieved Osiris's body, took him to a cave, and brought him back to life. When Set found out about this, he was furious. And so he tracked down Osiris and chopped his body into pieces and scattered his pieces down the Nile River. Isis again went and retrieved all of his pieces, took him back to the cave. She found everything except for his phallus, and for that she made a new one. She brought him back to life long enough to conceive their divine child, Horus. And then Osiris went on to be king of the underworld, which for the Egyptians was where all life came from and all treasures were found. And we use dismemberment metaphors in our language all the time. We say we're falling apart, we can't get it together, our hearts are broken, our lives are shattered. And in vagus nerve terms, in the midst of trauma, I would say that our vagus nerves are physically traumatized. They're physically cut off at these horizontal structures, that it's been energetically dismembered within. And where if you imagine being in that story of Isis and Osiris, everybody all probably thought that Osiris's destiny was to be the king of Egypt, but his true destiny was to be the king of the underworld. And he literally had to come apart to come back together in a new way. And that's really the initiation that trauma offers us, because you can't be the same person that you were before. And really stepping into that new way of being and letting go of the old way is a very universal challenge. And I think, or what I find is that the vagus nerve is just a very powerful structure to access to facilitate that transformation.
That's so powerful. So powerful. So I feel, Melanie, that everything you're talking about is something that we could all really spend some time linking together with this period of time that we're all living in right now, which is a time of high stress, deep unknown, incredible transformation. We all understand that things are, this was a quote that came from an episode this season, things are no longer, but they're not yet.
Yes.
And so we're in a very in-between stage for so many things. And for sure, that is having an effect on our digestion of trauma, on our vagus nerve, I'm sure, and how that's all being metabolized. So I'd love for you to talk a bit about this moment in time that we're all living in and what you're seeing, as well as what advice you can give for working with all of the experiences we're having, mind and body.
Absolutely. So story lives in the body in very prescriptive ways. And one of the easiest ways to understand this is through Western astrology. So the ventricles in your brain that make cerebral spinal fluid look very much like the ram's horns that represent Aries. And in astrology, Aries rules the head. And the way your hyoid bone in your throat sits on top of your larynx looks very much like the symbol for Taurus, and Taurus rules the throat. And our aortic arches in our chests are the same shape as the symbol for Leo, and Leo rules the heart. And it works this way the whole way through the body. So we carry stress in very specific ways through the body. And, to me, this is just fundamentally how the cosmos is coded into us as well. So 2020 for us is also a term of perfect vision. And certainly this year has dramatically transformed how we see things, how we see how our actions affect other people. And when the vagus nerve is compressed at the base of the skull, the spiritual underpinnings of that are when your heroics and your desires are at odds with each other. And we see this, so that can show up in a number of ways in an individual. It can be that you're being the hero in someone else's story at the expense of your own, or you're satisfying everybody else's desires at the expense of your own. But we're seeing this play out on a bigger scale in the United States, because the United States has a long history of being the hero in everybody else's stories. And we have very divergent sets of desires as we sit here in the middle of election week, as we're recording this, not knowing the outcome yet. And when your heroics and your desires are at odds with each other, it impairs your vision. And so I think this is really an opportunity to, I would say it's always an opportunity to go inward, but in an ideal situation, your heroics and your desires don't function at the expense of each other. And I think it's an opportunity to expand how we're seeing things. I think the root of any problem, whether it's physical or business or personal development or stress, is resisting your own expansion in an ever-expanding universe. So learning to see things in new ways and learning to redefine what a hero is, or what our warrior archetype is. I think the future is collaboration. I don't think the future is fighting. And we've been conditioned so much to think in dichotomies. And really, we are fundamentally made in trinity. We come from three embryological layers. Our nerves and our muscles and our arteries and veins all have three fundamental layers. And even when I look at the north and the south pole of the earth, the third piece of that is the electromagnetic field. And so there's always a third piece and a third perspective. And that's part of why meditation and mindfulness and things like that are so powerful on the individual level. But we have to, we're in the midst of this big Osiris wound where you're kind of coming apart at the seams, but there's a whole new way to come back together that we're not seeing. It's not about being this way or that way in the way that the narrative that is happening in a lot of the media. There's a whole new way to be that I think we can explore. And I think the vagus nerve offers us a lot in that way as a model that we can model our businesses and institutions after it to create better flow, because when your vagus nerve is functioning better, everything in your body tends to function better. And that we can look at compression points, not only in our bodies, but in our businesses and in our institutions, and that we can look at this symbolism as well. Libra rules the kidneys, and the sign of Libra is a set of scales. And in the United States and other countries, scales also represent justice. And the populations with the highest levels of kidney disease also have the highest levels of social injustice, African Americans and Native Americans. And so these stories, we really embody this energy in these stories and these symbols on a big, big level. And we're solving problems in paradigms that no longer fit us. We have to expand our paradigms to expand our problem solving. And vision is critical for good leadership at any level. And I think 2020 is really offering us this expanded vision. And it's going to be uncomfortable to step into this new framework, to think about, change. We're all wired for what's familiar, not what's right for us or what's best for us.
Yes, everything you're saying so resonates. I agree with you. I think there is transformation happening, and transformation is always uncomfortable, and it's sometimes ugly, and there's sometimes destruction involved. And that's where, of course, a lot of the fear comes from and the resistance. So, Melanie, if listeners are really curious about this and, kind of putting pieces of their own stories together here, where they're like, oh yeah, I've been through these things and I have this physical discomfort and I'm wanting things to be different or look different. Where do you begin? I mean, we all begin in different ways. Like some of us practice yoga, some of us go for therapy, some of us go to physical therapy, but it's almost like a uniting force that you're talking about here. Like, where does someone begin?
Well, I'll say one, I offer, if you go to my website, melanieweller.com, I offer a free vagus nerve decompression course that takes you through a self-assessment and all of the exercises. And it's a nice way to kind of, even when the vagus nerve compression isn't your primary problem, it cleans the windshield so that you can see better what's going on. I think in very simple terms, we need to develop a language with our bodies. We're all very much in our heads and not in our bodies. And at the fundamental level, you have to know how your body says yes and how your body says no. And to just slow down enough to really feel that. By the time somebody shows up in my office with back pain, their body's been screaming no for a long time. And I work with people online as well. But, by the time that you're encountering severe obstacles, you've probably been getting a no from your body in different ways. And we just haven't been paying attention, and we're not trained. We're all, to wait until you pass a diagnostic threshold to pay attention to your body is waiting way too long, because you get many clues before you end up in that state. When people come to back pain, for example, they'll say, oh, I had a little twinge here, and oh, I had a little ache there or whatever. And then you had the big episode where the back pain got severe. And so I think learning, really just tapping into your body and thinking about, how does your heart say yes? And what does that feel like? And starting with things that are true, like your name and your physical location, and with very simple questions like, how does wearing the blue shirt today feel? Yes or no? And how does wearing the white shirt today, how does having soup for dinner versus chicken for dinner feel? With these very benign decisions, to get this language with your body. Your mind is, in the way that we culturally and collectively think about it, is a very slippery thing that will very often lie to you, but your body will always tell you the truth.
Yes, it is a relationship with our body, and it's where our intelligence really lives.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so having developing a language for that is primary, and everybody has their own language. I know how my body speaks, but I really try to help people understand how their body speaks, and that their language doesn't have to look like my language. So they learn their bodies in the language with which they're most fluent versus the one that I'm imposing, that I could impose upon them if I wanted to.
Right. Wow. I feel, just to kind of like bring this to a close in a sense, because we could keep going, is that I feel like, the mixture of being home more, being more in, I don't want to say we're in lockdown anymore, but I think we're all still experiencing a much, much more edited lifestyle. We are being asked to pay more attention to our own rhythms, our own feelings, our own thoughts. And then on top of it, being asked to expand past maybe what we sat with before, like new iterations, new ways of thinking, new ways of doing things. And this is not an accident. Like I don't want to say that anything is meant to be. I don't like to look at something like a virus as meant to be, but I do feel like humanity is ready. Our planet is ready for a shift. And whether we like it or not, or we're having fun or not, that is what's happening. And our body is sort of also a representative of managing that journey. And I feel like I've learned so much from you today about that bridge, about that expression through this very powerful nerve. It almost seems to me like the nerve expresses reality.
Oh, I think absolutely. I would completely agree. I think, I see the vagus nerve as very much analogous to the Laniakea supercluster, of which our Milky Way galaxy is one little tiny dot. And it's like the mycelium network of the earth that connects all of the trees and plants together. And I think moving forward, one of the thoughts that really helps me and that I teach a lot as well and incorporate in the way that it fits really nicely into my vagus nerve decompression system as well, is a piece of wisdom from a tribe in the Andes Mountains. And they say that your future is behind you, propelling you forward, and your past is in front of you, waiting for you to make peace with it and clear your way. And I love the idea that our future has our backs, and it's not something that we have to go chase or reach for out in front of us, that we're supported by it, we're cradled by it, we're guided by it. And many people do not have enough rib cage expansion on the backside of their rib cages. And so part of what I will ask people to do is inhale into the backside of their hearts. And that one serves to give the vagus nerve more space as it goes through your posterior mediastinum. And it also allows you to connect with that future, to really breathe into that. And I find it super helpful, especially with anxiety, depression, to expand that space and to really feel that you are supported.
I love that. Thank you. I was doing it while you were saying it. I was breathing into my back ribs, and it does feel very good. Melanie, thank you so much. Please let us know where we can find you, where we can follow your work, and perhaps even work with you.
Yes, thank you. My website is my name, Melanie Weller, MELANIEWELLER.com. And my social media across Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram is Embody Your Star. It's all under my name, but the handle is Embody Your Star. And yeah, get on my mailing list. I offer classes intermittently. I train healthcare practitioners and other healers in what I do, and that's all online. I work with people all over the world. This is very much like speaking to the body in its original language. So it works not only just in person, but also over the internet. And it's beautiful to be able to connect with people in this way. So I'm definitely expanding my teaching presence in 2021 and the coming years. So there will be lots more to offer. And my vagus nerve decompression exercises, I really just want to be part of public health because they work so beautifully. And I think we often make healing way too hard. And you can do one or two of these simple exercises very often and get really dramatic responses in your physical body.
Well, thank you, Melanie, for all of your work. There's nothing more powerful than being in the midst of somebody who's a healer and who brings so much passion and knowledge and commitment to work like this. And the world needs it right now more than ever. So thank you so much for being with me today.
Oh, thank you, Randy. Thank you for sharing your platform. I really appreciate the opportunity to get my voice out there.
I'm so glad you're using it.
Thank you.
And for all of you today, I hope that you will take some of this wisdom and some of this fascinating and powerful information and think about your body, how you're speaking to it, how you're listening to it, what might be the things that you've gone through that are still being blocked or need release. And perhaps you'll want to head over to Melanie's website to learn more about the vagus nerve and about how you can access a different, softer, kinder existence with yourself. So until next time, friends, as always, I appreciate support of the podcast. If you are not subscribed yet, I encourage you to do so. I also encourage you to head over to the website, thegoingbeyondmovement.com. And if you're not on our newsletter list, drop your email and you will get a special link to bonus content. And the bonus content are a little bit more like fun, funny, personal conversations with my guests. And they're short and they're sweet and they're fun. And they'll be just for you as a newsletter subscriber. So everyone, I really appreciate you. Take good care of yourself. And until next time, be well. Bye.